The twin suns scorched the skies of planet Karos as war drums echoed across the sands. Zaylara, the infamous alien warrior of the Threxian Dominion, marched proudly through the combat arena. Her skin was cobalt blue, her muscles carved like stone, and her golden armor glistened under the brutal heat. She was undefeated for 86 duels, and her voice thundered with arrogance every time she looked at her next opponent. Today, her voice echoed again as she shouted across the sand at the row of fresh warriors brought in from other planets. Her sharp silver eyes scanned the crowd, and then she smirked when she spotted the human. He was standing quietly in the back, dressed not in power armor, but in something light, a simple combat vest and cloth trousers tucked into worn boots. He held no weapon, no shield, no signs of advanced tech. He just stood there, eyes steady, arms folded. Zaylara pointed at him and laughed. She called him a soft creature, a walking excuse for a species, a mistake of evolution. Her people joined in, chanting and pounding their fists against the metal walls of the Colosseum. The human said nothing. Not a single word left his mouth. But his eyes never left hers. Spectators from over 20 species filled the seats, hoping to watch another brutal show. The Karos arena was known for its bloodshed, and no human had ever walked out of it alive. The air was dry, buzzing with energy. But even with all the noise, Zaylara's confidence filled the arena more than any sound could. She walked to the center, dropped her heavy double-edged blade into the sand, and spread her arms, daring the human to come forward. The gates opened. He stepped in slowly. He looked so calm it made the crowd uneasy. No armor, no visible strength. No fear. Zaylara snarled, cracked her knuckles, and began to circle him. She was twice his size and trained since birth in bone-breaking combat. Her first swing was fast. A punch meant to end the fight in one strike, but it hit nothing. The human tilted his head slightly, and her punch passed by him like wind. Audience gasped. Zaylara blinked in disbelief. She swung again, faster this time. The human ducked. A third time, and he spun behind her. His movements were not fast, but they were perfect, balanced, precise, like he had already seen everything before it happened. Zaylara growled and launched a knee toward his ribs. He caught her leg mid-air, twisted, and brought her crashing to the ground with a sudden thud that echoed across the stadium. It was silent for the first time in hours. Zaylara's chest rose and fell as she lay in the sand, eyes wide with shock. The human stood over her, breathing evenly, then stepped back. He didn't strike again. He simply waited. She looked up, embarrassed, confused, humiliated. Her second in command, watching from the stand, stood frozen. None of them had ever seen her fall. Ever. Zaylara pushed herself up and roared. The sound was primal. She ran forward again, fists flying, her hair whipping around her like a storm. But every attack missed. The human didn't even counter. He let her wear herself out, dodging, stepping aside, guiding her rage into the ground. When she stumbled, just for a moment, he raised a single hand. Then, with the edge of his palm, tapped her neck gently. Zaylara collapsed. She lay there in the dirt, breathless, blinking up at the burning sky. The human crouched beside her and offered her water from a small metal canister. The crowd was silent. They had no idea how to react. For them, strength meant force, violence, dominance. But this human showed them something else. Control, calm, technique, power without cruelty. Zaylara took the canister with a shaking hand. The announcers didn't declare him the winner. They didn't know what to say. The fight had ended without blood, without pain, yet with absolute defeat. And worse, it had come from someone she had mocked. Someone she had said was weak. The words rang in her head again and again. She had laughed. And now she couldn't even stand. Later that night, in the quiet of her private tent, Zaylara sat alone in the dark. Her armor was still scattered on the floor, and her pride lay broken beside it. She had faced monsters, champions, machines, but never anything like him, not just because he defeated her, but because he didn't even hate her. He had spared her. And somehow that cut deeper than any blade. The next morning, Zaylara didn't appear for the ceremonial breakfast. That had never happened before. As Threxian general, she was always first at the table, first in the training ring, first to challenge any warrior who looked at her wrong. But today, her seat remained empty. Whispers began across the camp. The human hadn't returned to his assigned quarters either. The guard said he was simply walking through the desert alone. Like nothing had happened, inside her quarters, Zaylara stood facing a mirror. She stared at her reflection, her hands trembling slightly. There was no wound on her body, no bruise, no cut. But something inside her had cracked. No warrior had ever humiliated her like that before. He hadn't even tried. He moved like he already knew she couldn't win. And worst of all, he hadn't mocked her in return. That silence made her furious. It made her curious. She stormed out without armor, wearing only a dark training suit. Her boots kicked up dust as she marched toward the lower camp. The soldiers stepped aside. They could feel the storm in her steps. She found the human near the water tanks, sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, meditating. Calm as ever, she shouted his name. He opened one eye and looked up at her like they were old friends. That look stabbed deeper than her own blade. "I demand a rematch," she growled. The human shook his head. "You don't need one." Those 5 words made her blood boil. How dare he decide that? She clenched her fists and took a fighting stance, ready to strike again. But he didn't flinch. He just sat there. Then he said something she didn't expect. "You lost the battle before it even began. Because you were already convinced I was nothing." She froze. Zaylara's people had conquered dozens of planets. Their warriors were trained from birth, their tech sharp, their hearts ruthless. To them, humans were soft, emotional, fragile. She had believed it all her life. But now she was face to face with something she couldn't understand. This man didn't carry rage. He didn't seek revenge. And yet he was stronger than anyone she had ever known. Later that day, the Emperor's envoys arrived. They had heard about the duel. They wanted to see the human in person. A crowd gathered again in the arena. This time, it was not for a fight. It was for a demonstration. The human was asked to teach Threxian elite guards how he moved, how he fought. Zaylara stood in the back, arms folded. She said nothing, but her eyes never left him. He moved slowly, almost lazily, but every motion was precise. He explained his technique in simple words. "It's not about power, it's about balance. If your mind is still, your body listens." The Threxian warriors didn't understand at first. They tried to copy his motions, but they stumbled. Zaylara watched, her pride struggling against her curiosity. And then, she stepped forward. "Show me again," she said. That the human nodded. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just moved. Zaylara mirrored him, step by step, strike by strike. The crowd watched in silence as the two circled each other. It was not a duel. It was something else. A dance between discipline and strength. Between pride and humility. Between fire and calm. By the end of the session, sweat dripped from Zaylara's brow. Her chest rose and fell with effort. She bowed slightly, not in defeat, but in respect. The human returned the bow. The crowd murmured. Some were confused, some were stunned, and some began to wonder if humans weren't weak after all. That day, a new word spread through the camp. One they hadn't used for humans before: teacher. That night, under the stars, Zaylara stood outside her tent. She watched the sky, her arms behind her back. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't humiliated. She was thinking. Something had changed in her. The man who defeated her had done more than embarrass her. He had made her question everything she believed about power. A soft voice broke her thoughts. It was him. He stood beside her, holding a small sphere of light from his world, a solar lantern. "You looked cold," he said. She accepted it in silence. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what to say, but her heart whispered something she didn't understand yet. The days passed like silent fire across the desert sky. Training continued, but something was different in the camp. Soldiers who once mocked the human now watched him closely. Some tried to copy his moves in private. Others whispered his name with cautious respect. Even the younger Threxians, born and raised in the cult of dominance, now paused before calling humans weak. It wasn't because of one fight, it was because of how the human lived. He trained every morning before the suns rose. He shared his food with the smallest guards. He fixed broken weapons without being asked. And when he wasn't training, he sat under the shade with eyes closed, listening to the wind. Zaylara observed from a distance. She wanted to speak to him, ask more about his world, his way of thinking. But every time she stepped forward, pride held her back like chains. Then one morning, a horn sounded from the outer sands. It wasn't a signal they expected. The watchtowers lit red. Scouts returned with broken armor and burn marks on their skin. A rogue clan of Threxian outcasts had entered the desert with stolen war beasts and plasma bows. The outer settlements were already in ruins. The commander gathered his forces immediately. Zaylara strapped her armor on without hesitation. The human, as always, stood at the edge, calm and quiet. "We'll destroy them before sunset," said Zaylara. "No," said the human softly. "You'll lose half your warriors if you rush." That single sentence silenced the tent. The commander looked furious. "We don't take orders from outsiders," he growled. Zaylara didn't defend the human. She didn't argue. But she looked at him with narrowed eyes. "Then what would you do?" she asked. He stepped forward and placed a map on the table. He marked positions with tiny stones. "They're using mobility, not force. They know you expect a head-on fight. But they'll strike your supply lines first, then disappear into the sands. Send your strongest ahead, and they'll lead you into traps. Instead, surround them with your lightest scouts, cut their water supplies, and collapse the ground behind them. Force them to stand still, then you win." The tent was silent again. Zaylara stared at him for a long moment. "You've fought before," she said. He didn't answer, he just looked down. But there was pain in his eyes. Deep, buried pain. The kind only seen in true warriors. By dusk, her forces moved according to his plan. Zaylara led the eastern flank herself. The heat was unbearable. The air was sharp with sand. The rogue Threxians didn't see the trap until it was too late. Their war beasts ran dry. Their bows jammed in the wind. When they finally stood to fight, the human stepped in from the west faster than any of them expected. He didn't carry a weapon. Just rope, tools, and his hands. He moved like a shadow through the chaos, taking down riders, tying their legs, stealing their weapons without a sound. Zaylara saw him from across the ridge. She couldn't believe what she was witnessing. He fought with purpose, not to kill, but to stop. Every motion was exact. No anger, no shouting, just skill. Like he had trained for this his whole life. When the dust cleared, and the last rogue was captured, the camp roared in victory. No soldiers were lost, the wounded were few. The commander, now quiet and pale, simply nodded at the human in shame. But Zaylara did more than nod. She walked straight to him, her armor scorched, her blade in hand. She stopped inches from him. "You could have taken command," she said. "I didn't need to," he replied. "Why not?" "Because I trusted you would listen." That answer made her chest tighten. She looked down, unsure of what she was feeling. No man had ever made her feel this. No warrior had ever seen her as an equal and then stepped aside. It wasn't weakness. It was something more powerful. She realized it now. That night, the fire burned higher than usual. The soldiers sang, celebrated, drank. But the human sat alone again, staring at the stars. Zaylara approached slowly, then sat beside him. She didn't speak for a while. The stars blinked above like ancient memories. Then finally, she said something that shocked even herself. "Teach me everything." The human looked at her, not surprised, not proud, just gentle. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded. "Not just your fighting. Your mind, your balance, whatever makes you. You." He didn't smile. He simply offered his hand. "And this." Time Zaylara took it. Zaylara trained under the human's guidance every sunrise. She no longer arrived late or wore her rank-like armor. She showed up early, silent, focused. The other warriors noticed her shift. The same woman who once shouted through drills now moved with quiet purpose. She stopped mocking. She started watching. And the more she trained, the more she realized how much she didn't know. He didn't just teach her to fight. He taught her to breathe, to listen, to feel the movement of wind before throwing a punch, to sense an enemy's heartbeat before they struck. His methods were strange to her people, slow, patient, almost gentle. But they worked. Her strikes became faster, her balance sharper, her anger quieter. She was becoming someone new. One morning, while they stood on the cliffs above the camp, she asked the question that had burned in her chest since their first duel. "Why did you spare me?" The human didn't answer right away. He watched the sun rise. Then he said, "Because hurting someone doesn't prove strength. Choosing not to does." Zaylara blinked. Her people were taught the opposite since birth. She looked down at her hands and wondered who she had been all these years. Their connection deepened with every day. They still didn't speak much in front of others. But in the quiet of the night or between training sessions, their words became honest. Zaylara shared stories of her brutal childhood, her trials, the expectations placed on her as a female commander. He shared memories of Earth, of wars he never wanted to fight, of friends he buried too young. Their pain was different, but it understood each other. One night, while training under the stars, a sudden alert echoed across the desert. This time, it wasn't rogue clans. A cruiser had crashed outside the western border. The ship bore no markings. Smoke curled into the sky like a warning. Scouts sent to investigate didn't return. Zaylara and the human exchanged one look and ran. When they reached the site, they found the wreckage half buried in sand. It wasn't Threxian. It wasn't human either. The metal was blackened, breathing heat. Then a shape moved from the shadows. A tall figure with armor that shimmered like glass stepped forward. The air around it bent unnaturally. Zaylara raised her blade. But the human stepped forward first, his eyes narrowing as he studied the alien. The creature spoke in a language they didn't understand, but it didn't matter. Its hand lifted and the ground cracked beneath them. Zaylara stumbled back, but the human didn't move. He reached for his pouch and threw a small pulse stone to the left. The moment the alien looked, he dashed forward, striking at a joint in its armor with precision. The strike worked. The being collapsed, twitching, but not for long. A wave of dark smoke burst from its body, forming two more shapes clones, or perhaps something worse. Zaylara leapt into the fight, blade flashing. The human fought beside her. Their movements were in sync now, fluid, graceful, deadly. But the enemy was unlike anything they'd seen. Not faster, not stronger, just unpredictable. Zaylara's shoulder was burned. The human took a hit to the ribs. They backed into each other, breathing hard. "We can't win this straight," she muttered. "Then we don't fight straight," he replied. He pointed at the ship's core, still glowing. If we overload it, the shockwave might disable them. She didn't argue. She trusted him now with something greater than loyalty. Her legs sprinted through flame. His hands worked over the core's controls. The aliens noticed too late. A pulse exploded from the wreckage, shattering the sand with light. The shapes vanished in smoke. Silence fell. Zaylara lay on the ground, panting, eyes wide. The human sat beside her, his face dirty, bleeding, but alive. She looked at him and laughed. "We almost died," she said. He smiled. "You say that like it's new." Back in the camp, both were treated like survivors of myth. The commander knelt before them, declaring their bond stronger than command. But Zaylara didn't care about titles anymore. That night, she stood before her warriors. "This human taught me how to win without hatred," she said. "And now I ask you all, are you willing to learn the same?" No one said a word. But one by one, they stepped forward and knelt beside her. The following week, ships arrived from the outer colonies. But they didn't carry warriors or traders. They carried diplomats in sharp suits, wearing Earth symbols. Zaylara stood at the gates when they landed, her expression unreadable. Behind her, the human watched with cold eyes. He hadn't spoken since the signal came in. Something about it had changed him. Not fear, something deeper. When the men stepped out of the ships, they saluted him, not Zaylara. "Captain Reed," one of them said. "You weren't supposed to interfere with native war zones. We're pulling you back." Zaylara blinked. "Captain?" The human never told her he held a rank. He had never spoken about Earth's military. The man she knew was calm, patient, quiet. But now she realized he hadn't forgotten war. He had been trying to escape it. "I'm not going back," Reed said firmly. "You don't have a choice," the diplomat replied. Zaylara stepped forward. "He's earned respect here. More than any man in your shiny boots. You'll not take him without a fight." The Earth officials looked surprised. "With respect, Commander, he's not yours to keep." Zaylara's hand reached for her blade. But Reed gently caught her wrist and shook his head. "Don't," he whispered. "They're not the enemy." Still, she felt anger burn in her chest. Not because of the diplomats, but because Reed looked tired, like someone being dragged back into a life he didn't want. She watched as he walked toward them, shoulders straight. But then, something strange happened. The Earth ship's system started blinking red. One of the engineers gasped. "We're being scanned. Someone's hacking our signal." A new symbol flashed on their screens, dark, clawed, ancient. Zaylara's blood went cold. She recognized that mark. The Dominion. A long-dead race of warlords known for harvesting entire colonies. "They were extinct," she whispered. Reed stepped beside her, his eyes scanning the ship's data. "They're not extinct, just sleeping." And now someone woke them up. Before the diplomats could react, a distant boom shook the sky. An unnatural tear opened beyond the horizon. Out of it crawled something massive, part ship, part creature, covered in black scales and sharp wings of bone. It hovered silently, casting a shadow over the desert. From its sides dropped pods, armored beasts that slammed into the sands and cracked open like eggs. From them came figures in silver masks and black armor, walking like death. The camp burst into chaos. Threxian warriors scrambled to form lines. Zaylara mounted the highest ridge and shouted orders. Reed grabbed his tools and sprinted toward the command core. This was no longer a personal battle. It was a planetary invasion. The first wave hit like thunder. Zaylara clashed with a masked warrior, her blade sparking against its curved weapon. She struck fast, harder than ever. But they didn't scream, didn't bleed. They fought like machines, with the memories of killers. She nearly fell when a second one came behind her, but Reed was there. His palm pulsed with a shock glove as he knocked the enemy down. They fought back to back again, like the day in the desert. But this time, there was no end. The enemy kept coming. For every one they dropped, 2 more replaced them. "We need to fall back," Reed shouted. "There's too many." Zaylara growled, "This is our home," but even she knew it. They couldn't hold the line. As they reached the inner command bunker, one of the diplomats, now wounded, gasped. "This isn't an invasion, it's a hunt. They came for him." All eyes turned to Reed. "What do you mean?" Zaylara asked. "They're targeting ex-commanders from the human rebellion years ago." Reed led one of the rogue missions that destroyed their forward nest. He wasn't just a captain. He was a ghost, the one who killed their queen. Zaylara turned to him, stunned. "Is that true?" Reed didn't answer with words. He just looked away. The truth hit her like a hammer. The quiet, kind, balanced man who trained her had once led a firestorm that shattered an empire. She didn't know whether to fear him or admire him even more. But now, that past had returned. And it wanted him dead. Reed stepped forward and looked at the burning sands beyond. "They'll destroy everything to get to me." Zaylara placed her hand on his shoulder. "Then let them try." Asterisk, the winds howled over the command bunker as the ground trembled beneath them. Outside, the black-armored craft kept advancing, their curved weapons glowing with strange red energy. Screams echoed through the desert as fire lit up the night. Zaylara stood beside Reed, her armor scratched, her eyes fierce. She had fought many wars, but this was no longer about glory. It was about protecting him, the man who changed everything inside her. Reed paced across the control room, scanning the remaining energy sources. "We can't stop them with weapons," he said. "They're not just soldiers. They're guided by memory. They're hunting what I did years ago. I destroyed their queen and erased their command hive. I thought it was over." Zaylara stepped forward. "Then let's finish what you started, together." He looked at her, not with fear, but with something deeper: trust. There was only one chance left. The old plasma core buried beneath the desert. It was part of an ancient system, unstable, powerful, and forgotten. If triggered, it would release a shockwave large enough to vaporize the craft's ship. But there was a catch. Someone had to activate it manually from the control spike underground. And no one would survive the blast. The room fell silent. "I'll do it," Reed said. "No," Zaylara replied instantly. "I will," Reed shook his head. "This started because of me." Zaylara stepped closer. Her voice was low, sharp. "And I decide how it ends. You taught me strength is not in killing. It's in choosing who you live for. My people are here. My blood is in this sand. You have a future. You're more than a warrior. You're the balance my world needs." Reed stared at her, struggling to speak. Finally he said, "Then I'm not leaving your side." "No one's asking you to," she whispered. They moved fast. Under the command bunker, the tunnels led deep into the ground. Ancient power cables glowed faint blue. Steam hissed from cracked vents. The roar above grew louder. Time was ending. When they reached the core spike, Reed activated the sequence. A soft hum filled the air. Lights flickered around them. 10 minutes. That's all they had. Outside, the craft noticed. Their ship began to rise, pulling back, but they weren't fast enough. Inside the bunker, Zaylara and Reed stood together, watching the countdown. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. He smiled. "Only that I didn't meet you sooner," she laughed quietly. "Then let's make this count." But then something unexpected happened. The diplomat who once wanted Reed taken off-world entered the spike chamber. His arm was bleeding, but he carried a small cube. "This is a long-range neural relay," he said. "We can transfer the activation signal remotely, but it needs one of you to stay linked through pain synchronization." Reed stepped forward. "Without hesitation, I'll do it," but Zaylara caught his hand. "You're not dying here," she said. "This isn't your burden." "It's not about burden, it's about choice, and I choose this." Before he could stop her, she pressed, her hand against the relay. The cube glowed, and needles extended into her palm. She didn't scream. She looked at Reed with fire in her eyes. "Go," she said. "I won't leave you. You taught me what strength is. Let me show you what it becomes." Guards grabbed him before he could argue. The bunker shook as the core spike reached final phase. Zaylara stood alone in the chamber, not afraid, not broken, but complete. From the surface, the desert split open with a burst of light. The craft ship shattered midair. The invaders vaporized in a shockwave that flattened the sand. And in the silence after, only one name echoed through the ranks. Zaylara. She was gone, or so they believed. 2 days later, Reed walked through the ruins, silent and numb. But then, as he crossed the edge of the crater, something moved. A hand reached from the ash. He ran, dug, and pulled her out. Burned unconscious but alive. The relay had short-circuited just before full pulse. Her life had been spared by seconds. She opened her eyes, coughed once, and whispered, "Told you I'd win." Reed laughed, tears in his eyes. Years passed. The war ended. The craft never returned. Zaylara became the new general of United Threxian Forces. And by her side, always stood the human who had once been mocked, once walked alone, but now carried the respect of worlds, not because he won a fight, but because he changed the heart of a warrior.